The day my mom found out how much I earn, she didn't congratulate me. She didn't hug me, smile for me, or tell me she was proud. Instead, she showed up at my doorstep with a suitcase in one hand, a fake smile plastered across her face, and a list of demands that nearly destroyed everything I'd spent years building. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it hits close to home, don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear this. My name is Evan Mercer, 29 years old, an HVAC technician who made more money than my family ever guessed. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Not because I was ashamed, because I was cautious. My mom, Lorraine, had a lifetime record of financial disasters. Overdue loans, impulse purchases, emotional manipulation disguised as motherly needs. I learned early that if she even sniffed money on me, she drained it fast. So I kept quiet. I lived modestly. I helped only when I could, not when she demanded. But all it took was one careless sentence at a family picnic. My cousin, tipsy and loud, slapped me on the back and said, "Man, with what you're making now, you should be the one hosting the family reunion." The entire table went silent. Then I felt it, my mom's eyes on me. Sharp, calculating, a look I knew too well. It wasn't pride. It was entitlement waking up. She didn't say anything then. She didn't have to. That night, just as I was about to sleep, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, there she was. Lorraine. Hair perfectly done. Perfume strong. A suitcase parked beside her like she'd been waiting for a grand entrance. "Sweetheart," she said, "I have nowhere else to go." I knew instantly she was lying. I stepped aside anyway, because old guilt still ran deep in me. But the second she walked in, she acted like the place was hers. She looked around with this satisfied smirk, like she'd just moved into a luxury suite she'd won. "You really did well for yourself," she said, running her fingers along my dining table. "It's only right that you start helping your mother now." I froze. Within an hour, she told me her plan. I would temporarily take her in, cover her credit card debt, pay for her car repairs, and help her get back on her feet. She made it sound noble, like I was fulfilling some sacred duty. But what I felt was fear. Because behind her soft voice and sad backstory, I sensed something darker. Something planned. Something she'd been waiting years to pull. And when I later found out she still had her house and was secretly renting it out for cash, I realized this wasn't desperation. It was a takeover. A hostile one. And my life was about to get a lot worse before it got better. The first night was supposed to be temporary. One night, just enough time for my mom to figure things out. That's what I told myself as I handed her a blanket and pointed her toward the couch. Guilt sat heavy in my chest, the old kind that never fully left no matter how many boundaries I tried to build. Lorraine knew that. She'd always known that. And she used it like a key. By morning, the invasion had already begun. I woke up to the sound of drawers opening and closing. When I walked into the living room, she wasn't on the couch. She was in the kitchen, rearranging everything I owned. Plates moved. Cups relocated. Even my spices were lined up alphabetically. "Oh good, you're awake," she said without turning around. "Your organization system was giving me anxiety." It wasn't a system, it was my way. But she didn't ask. She didn't even acknowledge it. She just kept going, humming like she was settling into her own home. When I told her she didn't need to do all that, she smiled. "I'm just making this place feel more like, well, somewhere I finally deserve to live." That sentence hit me wrong. It felt rehearsed, like something she'd been waiting to say. By noon she had criticized my couch, too cheap, my curtains, depressing, and even my dishes, nothing matches, no wonder you're still single. I tried reminding her she was staying for one night. She simply patted my cheek like I was 5 years old. "Honey, let's not pretend you don't need the company." She had already switched my framed photos around, moved her suitcase into my bedroom as if it naturally belonged there, and taken a long shower using all my expensive products, the ones I'd splurged on for the first time in my adult life. But the real hit came that evening. I found a folded stack of envelopes sticking out of her purse. Rental contracts. Checks. Paperwork with her name on it. My stomach dropped as I read the top page. A rental agreement for her house, the one she claimed she had been forced to leave. She wasn't homeless. She wasn't desperate. She was collecting rent under the table while moving herself into my life like a queen reclaiming a lost throne. When I confronted her, she instantly shifted into emotional theatrics. Her eyes filled with tears on command. After everything I sacrificed for you, you're going to interrogate me? Do you remember how many jobs I worked? How many nights I stayed awake sewing your clothes because we couldn't afford new ones? Most of those sacrifices were exaggerated or untrue. But guilt is powerful, and she wielded it like a weapon sharpened over decades. The tears dried quickly when she realized I wasn't bending. She sighed dramatically, grabbed a throw pillow, and curled up on the couch. I'm too tired to fight. I think I'll just stay until things settle. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't leaving. Not willingly. Not ever. It didn't take long for the help me for a night promise to turn into full-blown demands. On the third morning, I found my mom sitting at my dining table with a stack of papers spread out like she was preparing for a business meeting. Except it wasn't business, it was my financial execution. She tapped the papers with a pen. We need to go over these. My credit card bill is past due, my car needs repairs, and I have a couple of small loans that need paying off. Nothing major. You can handle it. I stared at her, speechless. Mom, I never agreed to this. She rolled her eyes hard enough to shake the room. Don't start. You're making good money. This is what children do for their parents. Children help, I wanted to say. They don't become financial hostages. But Lorraine didn't care about the distinction. She was already moving to the next item. I'm also going to need access to your bank account, just in case of emergencies, she said, as casually as someone asking for sugar. I almost laughed. Absolutely not. Her expression twisted so fast it was almost frightening. The sweet mother facade cracked, and underneath was the version of her I remembered from my childhood. The one who believed love was something she could force, and loyalty something she could drain dry. She slammed her palm on the table. Do you want me to end up on the streets? Do you want people to think you let your own mother suffer? I'm not adding you to my account, I said quietly. That's when the crying began. Loud, dramatic, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She wailed loud enough for the neighbors to hear. My own son is abandoning me. After everything I gave up for him. When crying didn't work, she shifted tactics. She wiped her tears, straightened her back, and stared at me with cold calculation. You know what? She said softly. Maybe the family should hear how you're treating me. Maybe they need to know what kind of son you really are. I froze. Are you threatening me? I'm just telling the truth, she said with a shrug. Unless you want people to hear a different story. Like how you yelled at me, or shoved me, or left me without food. Shock shot through me. Mom, you know none of that ever happened. But they won't know that. She smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. And you know your aunt will believe anything I say. I felt something inside me crack. I tried setting boundaries. Calm ones. Firm ones. But every sentence I said, she mocked. Oh, look at you trying to be a big man, she sneered once. You think you can talk to me like I'm a stranger? I made you. Her presence began poisoning everything. My girlfriend, Marina, started noticing immediately. She'd walk in and feel the tension like a fog. Lorraine acted sweet whenever Marina was around, but the moment Marina left the room, Lorraine would glare at me like I'd betrayed her with my very existence. One night, Marina pulled me aside. Evan, she's manipulating you. She's not going to stop. I knew she was right, but facing the truth about my mother felt like peeling off my own skin. And Lorraine knew that. She counted on it. And she wasn't done yet. The breaking point didn't come with yelling. It came quietly, like a cold draft slipping under a locked door. Uninvited, unsettling, impossible to ignore. It started when I noticed things in my bedroom weren't where I left them. A drawer cracked open. Papers slightly shifted. My watch box moved an inch to the left. At first, I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. I wanted peace so badly that denial felt easier than confrontation. But the truth always surfaces. One afternoon, I came home early from a job. The apartment was strangely silent. No TV. No humming. No clattering of dishes. My stomach tightened. As I walked toward my room, I heard the faint rustle of paper. I stepped inside, and there she was. My mother stood by my dresser, my financial folder open in her hands. She didn't even jump when she saw me. She just stared at me like I had interrupted her. What are you doing? My voice cracked with disbelief. She held up her phone. Just taking pictures of your pay stubs and bank statements. My heart dropped into my stomach. Why? Because, she said, her tone slow and patient, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. I need proof in case you decide to hide money from me. My jaw tightened. Hide money? From you? Mom, those documents are private. She shrugged. Private? From your own mother? Don't be ridiculous. I felt heat rising in my chest. You had no right to go through my room. Oh, stop being dramatic. She waved her hand dismissively. I raised you. That means nothing in this house should be off limits to me. That sentence, I raised you, was always her shield, her dagger, and her excuse. I closed the folder, gripping it tightly. Mom, you need to leave. Today. Her expression hardened. No. No, I repeated, stunned. She sat on my bed like she owned it. This is my home now. I'm not going anywhere. You can't force your own mother onto the street. I'm not forcing you onto the street. You have a house. That place, she scoffed. I'm renting it out. And even if I wasn't, I'm not going back. This is better. Better for her, maybe. Not for me. That night, Marina came over, and she didn't hide her concern. When I explained what happened, she stared at me, horrified. Evan, she's violating your privacy. This is illegal. You need to take action. But the word legal made something twist inside me. It felt too harsh, too final. I wasn't ready to become the son who took legal steps against his own mother. I don't want to escalate, I said weakly. Marina cupped my face gently. She already escalated. I knew she was right. Every part of me knew it. Yet part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, my mother would stop if I just set one last boundary. But that hope shattered the next morning. Because Lorraine made one final move, one that would change everything. And this time, there was no going back. Evan thought things couldn't get worse than finding his mother digging through his private papers. But Lorraine had a way of proving him wrong every time. The final blow came on a Wednesday morning, when he opened his mailbox and found an official-looking envelope with a state seal stamped on the corner. At first, he thought it was some mistake, until he read the words Elder Support Claim, Notice of Filing. His hands went numb. Inside, Lorraine had filed a claim stating that Evan was refusing to support her basic living needs. She painted herself as a helpless, financially abandoned woman with nowhere to go, left to suffer while her wealthy son lived in comfort. She claimed he owed her monthly support payments. She even listed his apartment as her permanent residence, as if she had every right to be there. Evan felt the blood drain from his face. She lied. Boldly. Easily. Like it cost her nothing. When he confronted her, she didn't even bother pretending. She flipped through a magazine on his couch and said, "It's what any good mother should do. You owe me, and now the state will make sure you pay." He stared at her, stunned. "You filed a legal claim against your own son?" Lorraine didn't blink. "If you had just done the right thing, none of this would be necessary." For the first time in his life, Evan felt something inside him break completely. Quietly, like the snapping of a small bone you didn't know could fracture. The next day, things spiraled further. His manager pulled him into the office, looking uncomfortable. "Evan, your mother called." His stomach dropped. "What?" "She said you were hiding assets from her. That you were exploiting her. She implied there were things we should know about your financial background." Evan felt sick. "None of that is true. She's trying to manipulate me." The manager nodded gently. "I figured. You've always been honest. But you need to handle this." She crossed a line. That was the moment he realized he wasn't dealing with a desperate parent. He was dealing with someone willing to burn his entire life down if it meant getting her way. That night, when Marina arrived and found Evan sitting in silence at the table, she didn't speak at first. She simply put her hand on his. "What happened?" He slid the legal notice toward her. Marina read it slowly. Her jaw clenched. "Evan, this is fraud. She's lying to the state. She's trying to trap you financially. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is an attack." He swallowed hard, voice shaking. "She called my job too." Marina closed her eyes as if steadying herself. Then she said softly, "You've tried kindness. You've tried boundaries. You've tried patience. None of it matters to her. She doesn't want a relationship. She wants control." Evan didn't argue. He couldn't. Marina leaned closer. "It's time to fight back. Not with yelling. Not with guilt. With facts. With evidence. With the truth she's terrified of." And finally, Evan nodded, because he'd reached the limit of what his heart could tolerate. Now it was time to protect the life he built from the woman who gave him life in the first place. Evan wasn't a vengeful man by nature, but there comes a point where survival looks a lot like revenge. And after the fraudulent claim, after the phone call to his job, after watching his mother twist reality into a weapon, he realized he was out of choices. If he didn't stop her now, she would drain him emotionally, financially, and professionally until there was nothing left. The next morning, he walked into a small law office downtown, pale, exhausted, but determined. The attorney, a calm woman named Rebecca Shaw, listened carefully as Evan explained everything from the moment Lorraine learned his income to her most recent legal attack. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She simply took notes, her expression sharpening with every detail. When he finished, she folded her hands and said, "You have grounds to fight this, and to protect yourself long-term." Evan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "What do I need to do?" "Document everything. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every financial scheme. If she's renting property under the table, get proof. If she's threatening you, record it. You need a clean, factual timeline. No emotion, just evidence." For the first time in weeks, Evan felt a flicker of control. He spent the next 3 days gathering everything. The rental receipts he found crumpled in her purse. Copies of her bank statements she had conveniently left open on his table. Screenshots of messages where she demanded money for debts she fabricated. Marina helped him categorize it all into folders, digital and physical. "Think of it as armor," she said softly. "Every piece protects you." But the most important part came next. Rebecca advised him that in his state, he could legally record conversations as long as he himself was part of them. "Get her to talk," she said. "She's bold enough to incriminate herself." So Evan waited until Lorraine was in one of her moods, storming through the apartment, demanding updates on her elder support payments. He clicked the record button on his phone, slipped it into his pocket, and walked into the living room. "Mom," he said steadily, "we need to talk." She turned, already irritated. "Good. Maybe you're finally ready to do the right thing. I want access to your bank account, and you need to start paying the back support I filed for." Evan kept his voice calm, flat even. "You know the claim you filed is false. You're renting your house for income. You're not abandoned. You're not helpless." Lorraine's face twisted. "So what? A son owes his mother. Everything you have is because of me. If I want a little payback, I deserve it." "A little?" Evan asked softly. "I'll bleed you dry if I have to," she spat. "You think I care what the state says? I'll tell them whatever I have to in order to make you pay me. You're my retirement plan." Every word was recorded. Every threat. Every admission of fraud. When she finally finished ranting, Evan simply said, "Thank you." "For what?" she snapped. "For the truth." He walked away before she could respond. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel victorious. But he felt something steadier, something cleaner, a sense of resolve. He wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was ending the cycle. Forever. Evan sat across from Rebecca Shaw as she slipped the flash drive into her laptop. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the rapid clicking of her mouse as she opened the audio file. Lorraine's voice filled the office, shrill, angry, unmistakably proud of her manipulation. "I'll bleed you dry, you're my retirement plan. I'll tell the state whatever I have to." Rebecca's eyebrows lifted. "This," she said, pausing the recording, "is more than enough." Evan handed her the stack of documents next. Printouts of Lorraine's rental arrangements, photographs of the cash envelopes she collected every month, copies of debt notices she claimed he owed but never existed. Every page was a piece of the puzzle showing who Lorraine really was when stripped of excuses. "You did everything right," Rebecca said. "Now let me do the rest." The next week moved quickly. The state reviewed the evidence and immediately dismissed Lorraine's elder support claim. Not only dismissed, it was labeled fraudulent, and she received a formal warning. Any further attempt could lead to legal consequences. But the worst blow came when the tax department got involved. Rebecca had forwarded documentation of Lorraine's undeclared rental income. Thousands of dollars a year she never reported. That triggered an automatic audit. And the moment Lorraine received that letter, she exploded. Evan was in the kitchen, pouring himself coffee, when she stormed out of the guest room. Her face red, hair wild, waving the envelope like a threat. "What did you do?" she screamed. "You ruined my life, Evan. Do you understand that? You ungrateful little." "I didn't ruin anything," he said calmly. "You did this to yourself." Lorraine stomped toward him, shaking the papers. "If you had just given me what I deserved, none of this would have happened. Now they're saying I owe taxes." "Taxes? I can't afford that." "You could if you hadn't lied," he replied. His voice wasn't loud. "It didn't need to be. You filed a false claim. You tried to destroy my job. You admitted you were using me. Mom, this is on you." Lorraine's eyes flashed with fury and fear, an unstable mix Evan recognized from childhood. So what now? You're just going to let them take everything from me. Evan steadied himself, feeling the moment he had avoided for years finally arrive. You're leaving. What? She laughed, sharp and cold. You think you can kick your own mother out? I can, he said. And I am. Today. Lorraine's face twisted, disbelief morphing into pure rage. After everything I've done for you. You mean the guilt? The manipulation? The screaming? The lies? Evan shook his head. I'm done. You don't get to stay here anymore. Ever. For a moment, the apartment fell into a terrifying stillness. Then Lorraine threw the letter onto the floor and hissed. You'll regret this. I swear you will. But for the first time in his life, her words didn't land. They slid off him like rain on stone. She wasn't powerful anymore. She was just loud. And Evan was finally free enough to tell her no. Lorraine stood in the center of the living room with her arms folded, refusing to touch the empty boxes Evan had placed beside her door. The eviction notice sat on the table, signed, stamped, and fully legal. She stared at it like it was a personal betrayal rather than the consequence of months of deceit. Evan kept his voice steady as he reminded her she had 72 hours to leave, but she only sneered, declaring she wasn't going anywhere because a real son doesn't throw his mother out. Evan didn't argue this time. He had already spent years drowning in guilt and manipulation. He simply stepped aside when the knock came. The county deputy entered with calm authority, greeting Evan before turning to Lorraine. Ma'am, you've been served. You need to gather your belongings. Lorraine's mouth fell open, then twisted into outrage. She shouted that her own son was abandoning her, that Evan was being controlled by his wife, that no judge would allow this. But the deputy only repeated the order, firm and unmoved. When she realized this wasn't a threat, this was happening, her bravado cracked. She grabbed at the furniture, at the walls, screaming that no one appreciated everything she had sacrificed. Evan looked at her without anger for the first time, only clarity. When she still refused to move, the deputy called for a second officer to supervise. Together, they stood by as Lorraine stuffed clothes into garbage bags, muttering insults under her breath. She moved slowly on purpose, pausing dramatically to sigh and wipe imaginary tears. Every few minutes she glanced back at Evan to see if he would break, if he would cave the way he always had. But he remained still, arms crossed, breathing evenly. Marina stayed upstairs with the door closed, letting Evan handle it, but he knew she was listening, praying, hoping he would stay strong. As Lorraine stepped into the hallway, dragging her bags behind her, she dropped to her knees without warning. She collapsed forward, sobbing so loudly the sound echoed off the walls. The deputy rushed toward her, concerned, but Evan didn't move. He had seen this performance too many times, the collapses, the threats, the guilt trips designed to keep him tied to her needs forever. The officer checked her pulse, spoke to her gently, and realized quickly that nothing was physically wrong. Lorraine's wailing grew louder when she realized her act wasn't working. Mom, Evan said quietly, it's over. She lifted her head, mascara streaking down her face, rage twisting her expression. For a moment, the hallway felt colder. Lorraine leaned close enough that only he could hear her and whispered, You'll regret this. One day, you'll come crawling back. Evan didn't flinch. He nodded to the officers, who helped her stand and guided her outside. The door closed behind her, and for the first time in years, the house fell into peaceful silence. Evan didn't realize how loud the house had been until the silence finally settled. For the first time in months, he woke up without the sound of drawers slamming or Lorraine pacing the hallway like she owned the place. Marina brewed coffee downstairs, humming softly, and the simplicity of that moment almost brought him to tears. Peace felt unfamiliar, like something he had to relearn. They sat at the kitchen table together, no tension, no accusations, no surveillance. Just two people who finally had their home back. Marina reached across and took his hand, telling him she was proud of him for standing up for himself. Evan didn't feel proud, he felt exhausted. But somewhere inside that exhaustion, something fragile and hopeful was starting to grow. A week later, Evan stepped into a therapist's office for the first time in his life. He had walked past the door twice before forcing himself inside. The room was warm, quiet, and safe in a way he didn't know how to trust yet. When the therapist asked what brought him there, he opened his mouth. Then nothing came out. He sat there in silence for nearly a minute, staring at his hands. And then, without warning, the truth spilled out. Years of being told he owed his mother everything. Years of being guilt-tripped for every boundary he tried to set. Years of being made to feel responsible for her emotions, her decisions, her unhappiness. "I thought that's what being a good son meant," he admitted. "I thought I had to let her hurt me." The therapist nodded gently and told him something he had never heard before. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's control. The words hit him hard, like someone had lifted a veil he didn't know he was wearing. Evan left that session feeling wrung out but lighter. As days passed, he started recognizing patterns he had ignored all his life. He learned how quickly guilt could be weaponized, how manipulation could hide behind tears, how obligation could feel like love when you were raised inside it. He began to understand why he reacted the way he did, why Lorraine's voice echoed in his head even after she was gone. Healing wasn't immediate, but it was real. Marina noticed the change too. He laughed more, slept more deeply, spoke with more certainty. Then came the calls from extended family, cousins, aunts, even an uncle he barely spoke to. They all had the same message. "Evan, she's your mother. You shouldn't have thrown her out. Family takes care of family." The old version of him would have apologized, explained himself, tried to fix the image Lorraine had painted of him. But this time, he didn't defend or justify. He simply said, "I'm not responsible for her story anymore," and ended the call. For the first time in his life, he felt the power of a boundary that didn't break. The quiet in the house no longer felt strange. It felt earned. And as Evan stood by the living room window, watching the sun set over his finally peaceful home, he realized something simple but life-changing. Healing wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of freedom. Months passed before Evan heard from Lorraine again. Just when he began feeling like his life finally belonged to him, a letter arrived. An envelope with her handwriting scrawled across the front, the same handwriting that once signed school permission slips and grocery lists. He hesitated before opening it, knowing exactly what waited inside. And he was right. Page after page of demands, accusations, and twisted guilt. She claimed he owed her monthly support, blamed him for her financial problems, and even threatened to take legal action again if he didn't comply. The old heaviness pressed against his chest, the instinctual panic she'd spent years planting in him. But this time, his hands didn't shake. He didn't rehearse a response in his head. He didn't question himself. Instead, he calmly placed the letter on his kitchen table, took a picture, and forwarded it straight to his attorney. No hesitation. No emotional negotiation. Just a boundary, clear, firm, final. His attorney responded a few hours later, assuring him the letter would be added to her ongoing file and that Evan had no obligation to reply. Lorraine's previous fraudulent claims were still on record, and she was already under financial scrutiny for the rental income she tried to hide. Any further attempts to manipulate him would only worsen her situation. Evan thanked him, then sat in the stillness of the room, listening to the soft hum of his refrigerator. It was the sound of normal life, something he'd learned to cherish. Weeks went by, and then months, with no more letters, no unexpected visits, no threats. Lorraine simply vanished from his world. Some relatives said she moved states. Others said she was hiding from the debts piling up behind her. No one knew the full truth, and for once, Evan didn't feel responsible for finding it. What surprised him most wasn't her disappearance. It was his reaction. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel vindication. He felt a strange blend of grief and relief, like letting go of something heavy he never realized he'd been carrying since childhood. One evening, he sat on his balcony with Marina, watching the sun dip behind the roofs of the neighborhood. The air was warm, quiet, gentle. He told her he wasn't angry anymore, just tired of fighting battles he never chose. Marina leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You didn't lose a mother. You lost the pain she brought." He didn't respond, but he felt the truth settle in his chest, soft and steady. Healing wasn't a dramatic moment. It was a slow unfolding, a decision he made over and over. To choose peace, to choose himself, to choose a life not defined by someone else's chaos. Lorraine's shadow finally lifted, and in the space she left behind, Evan found something he had never truly known: closure. He looked out at the quiet street and realized that protecting his peace wasn't selfish. It was survival. It was growth. It was earned. Do you think Evan made the right choice by finally standing up to his mother and cutting ties, or should he have tried to reconcile with her one last time? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this grab your attention, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.